It started with a silence so thick it hummed between them. The boardroom air felt charged, like thunder hiding behind glass. She had walked in late, calm, deliberate, every click of her heel echoing like a countdown. He didn't look up at first, didn't have to. He felt her presence, sharp and electric. She spoke his name once, and the sound made him forget the numbers on the screen. She was supposed to pitch an idea. He was supposed to say yes or no. But as her voice cut through the room, soft but certain, something shifted. He saw everything, not her proposal, but the danger of wanting her. What kind of man saves his heart for profit, only to lose it to a single word? The lights dimmed with the setting sun, and when she finished, there was only the sound of her breath and his breaking restraint. He told himself it was just business, but even he could hear the lie in his voice. Ava could still feel his eyes long after she'd left the room. The elevator mirrors caught her reflection, but all she saw was the flicker of something unfamiliar, power mixed with doubt. She told herself it was just another pitch, another client. Yet, the way his voice lingered in her memory, low and measured, unsettled her. She'd played this game before, with men who thought control was currency. But Malik Ward didn't play, he commanded. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall over the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere high above, he was still watching her name flicker on his screen, replaying every word she said. Malik stood in his office after the meeting, city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling glass. He told himself to forget her. She was a contract, not a distraction. Yet his mind replayed her voice, the rhythm of her words, the way she looked at him like she could see right through his silence. He'd built walls higher than most could climb, and for years they kept him safe. But something about her made those walls feel less like protection and more like a prison. At home, Ava's brother Jordan was waiting, arms crossed, knowing that look on her face. He warned her once before. That charm and power always came with a price. She brushed him off with a tired smile, claiming it was all business. But as she poured herself a glass of wine and watched the city lights flicker through her apartment window, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger than a deal had just begun. Across town, Malik sat in his car in the rain, engine running but unmoving. The wipers swept slowly, rhythm matching his thoughts. He promised himself he wouldn't call her. He didn't believe in coincidences, but something about her timing, her presence, felt deliberate, like the universe was setting him up. He had built his life on control. But tonight, as thunder rolled over Atlanta, and her name echoed in his mind, he wondered for the first time what would happen if he let go. 3 days later, Ava found herself back in Malik's building, this time by his invitation. The deal had moved faster than she expected, too smooth to be coincidence. She told herself she was ready, that her voice wouldn't tremble when she spoke to him again. But when the elevator doors opened and he was standing there waiting, not behind a desk this time, but in the hallway, it felt different. His silence wasn't cold, it was aware. He told her they'd be working closely for the next few weeks. She nodded, pretending not to notice the slight shift in his tone, or the way his eyes lingered for just a second too long. Just business, she whispered under her breath. But her pulse had other plans. Work began like any other project. Meetings, strategy sessions, and shared screens filled with figures. But the hours stretched into late nights, their rhythm unspoken yet perfectly in sync. Ava noticed how he listened when she talked, how his focus never broke. She wondered if this was what danger looked like. Calm, composed, and devastatingly patient. He didn't touch her. Not once, but every word between them felt like a slow kind of contact. And when their hands brushed while passing a file, she swore she felt the world narrow to that single moment. They took a break that night, neither admitting it was because their thoughts had drifted too far from work. The office terrace was quiet, The city below humming with Friday energy. Ava leaned on the railing, staring at the skyline, her heartbeat steadying in the cool air. Malik joined her, standing close but not touching. For a while, neither spoke. Then he asked about her plans after the deal closed, a simple question that felt heavier than it should. She smiled faintly, eyes on the city lights. "I guess that depends on how this ends," she said. He turned toward her then, and the distance between them felt fragile, paper thin. By Monday, Serena had noticed the change. Malik was sharper in meetings, more guarded, but his eyes, when they drifted toward Ava, told another story. Serena had seen that look before, years ago, when he used to care about things he couldn't control. She cornered him after a call, her tone cool and precise. "Be careful mixing emotion with investment," she said. Malik didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence between them said enough. He was already too deep, and Serena knew it. That night, Ava received an email from Malik. Short, direct, professional. Yet, beneath the surface of those few lines was something unsaid. He wanted her at a private dinner to discuss final terms. She stared at the screen for minutes, the hum of her apartment filling the silence. It was business, she told herself. She'd go, present the final pitch, then walk away. But deep down, she already knew walking away was no longer an option. The restaurant was quieter than she expected, tucked in a corner of Midtown, lit like a secret. Ava arrived early, hoping to steady herself before he walked in. But the moment Malik entered, her breath hitched. His presence filled the room, all confidence and quiet restraint. They talked about numbers at first, about marketing reach and profit margins. But every pause between words seemed to hum with something else. When the waiter left, their eyes met across the table. She didn't look away this time. Neither did he. For a man who lived by rules, the way he looked at her now broke every single one. After dinner, rain poured over the city like a whispered dare. Malik offered her a ride, and though she hesitated, she didn't say no. The drive was quiet, heavy with unspoken things. When they stopped outside her building, the world seemed to still. Only the patter of rain and their shallow breaths remained. He turned toward her slowly, and for once, didn't hide behind restraint. Their eyes met again. And this time, it wasn't about business. The air between them was warm, charged, waiting. It wasn't supposed to happen. 1 second, they were just breathing the same air. The next, his hand found hers. The touch was slow, careful, almost reverent. Her pulse raced, but she didn't pull away. The kiss wasn't planned, and yet it felt inevitable, like every word, every look before it had been leading to this. For a moment, the world fell away. No contracts, no meetings, just the quiet sound of rain and the truth they could no longer deny. Ava didn't sleep that night. Her lips still tingled, her thoughts a whirlwind she couldn't quiet. Every rule she'd made for herself about professionalism, control, self-preservation, suddenly felt fragile. She wasn't the type to fall, not for anyone. Yet something about him made her want to risk it. She told herself it was just chemistry, a passing mistake, but in her chest it already felt like more. Malik didn't call the next day. He tried to lose himself in work, in numbers, in anything that didn't smell like her perfume or sound like her laugh. But it was useless. Every email she sent carried weight. Every glance during a meeting burned. He told himself it couldn't happen again. Yet when she said his name, softly, just once, the echo of it broke the last piece of control he had left. The morning felt colder than usual. Ava walked into the office expecting routine. Instead, she felt distance. Malik's door stayed closed all day. No texts, no calls, no quiet glances across the table. Just silence. She brushed it off at first, focusing on her work, but When she overheard Serena's voice through the glass, her chest tightened. She caught fragments. Words like buyout, target company, strategic merger. And then her firm's name. The deal that brought her here wasn't a partnership, it was a takeover. Every meeting, every smile, every look, it had been part of a plan. By the time Malik realized what she'd heard, it was too late. She was already gone, her badge left on his desk, her scent still clinging to the air. He didn't chase her right away. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what to say. The truth was complicated. He had planned the merger before he even met her, but he hadn't planned her. The woman who could look him in the eye and make him question everything he'd built. Ava walked through the rain without caring where she was headed. The city blurred around her, neon lights and wet pavement melting into color. Every word she'd believed now felt heavy, poisoned by deceit. She remembered the way he looked at her. The honesty in his silence. Had that all been part of the game too? For the first time in years, she didn't feel in control. And worse, she missed him anyway. Later that night, Malik showed up at her apartment. She didn't open the door. He stood there for a long time, rain dripping from his hair, his hand pressed against the wood. Through the silence, he said what he should have said days ago. It started as business, but it's not that anymore. She stood on the other side, tears catching in her throat. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her there. Neither of them moved. The distance was only a door thick, yet it felt like a lifetime. Inside, Ava sank to the floor, her back against the same door he leaned on. His words replayed in her head, but she couldn't tell if they were meant to heal or hurt. She wanted to believe him, to believe that something real had lived beneath the lies. But the pain ran too deep. She whispered his name once, softly, the way she did that first night. On the other side, Malik heard it, and sound of it broke him all over again. Days turned into weeks. The deal went through without her. Malik's company expanded, profits soared, headlines praised him. But none of it felt like victory. The silence she left behind filled every space he walked into. He had built his empire on control, yet now he couldn't control the one thing that mattered. Every time he passed her old office, he half expected her laughter to echo again. It never did. He told himself he could live with the loss, that this was what success demanded. But in truth, it didn't feel like success at all. It felt like punishment. Ava threw herself into work. New clients, new contracts, new distractions. She built walls higher than before, the kind meant to keep out everything, even herself. Yet sometimes, when her phone buzzed late at night, her heart betrayed her. She'd imagine his name flashing on the screen, the sound of his voice in the dark. But it was never him. And though she'd never admit it out loud, some part of her missed the way he listened. How silence with him somehow felt like safety. Jordan noticed before she said a word. He'd seen that look on his sister before. The one that comes after breaking your own rules. "You let him in, didn't you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, just stared at the city below. "Then don't pretend you don't want him back," he added. Ava turned toward him, eyes tired but soft. "Some things can't be fixed," she whispered. But the truth, the one she would say, was that she still wanted to try. Malik's control began to crack in small ways. Missed meetings, restless nights, the hum of a phone he couldn't bring himself to dial. His mother noticed the change when he visited her one Sunday. She didn't ask for details. She just watched him, then smiled softly. "The problem with rules," she said, "is they don't keep love out. They only keep you lonely." Malik didn't answer, but her words followed him long after he left. That night, Ava walked home through the cool spring air, the city alive with noise and promise. She passed the restaurant where they first met, its windows glowing like memory. For a moment she paused, long enough to feel the ache return. Across town, Malik sat in his car again. the same way he had months before, staring at the same skyline. They were two souls orbiting the same city, both pretending they'd moved on, both knowing they hadn't. Some promises break quietly, others echo until they're answered. The night Malik finally called her, his voice was lower than she remembered. Steady, but stripped of armor. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked to meet. Ava almost said no, but something in his tone made her pause. She told herself she was only going for closure. Yet deep down, she knew better. When she saw him waiting outside her office, rain misting the air around him, she realized how much time had passed and how little had changed. The world moved on. Her heart hadn't. They sat in a quiet cafe a few blocks away, the hum of rain still soft against the windows. He told her everything. The truth about the deal, the mistake of silence, the fear that loving her meant losing control. Ava didn't interrupt. She just watched him, seeing not the man who'd betrayed her, but the one who finally looked human. "I wanted to protect what I built," he said quietly. "I just didn't know I'd lose what mattered more." She didn't forgive him right away, but for the first time she believed him. After he left, Ava sat there for a long time, letting the rain ease. She'd heard apologies before, rehearsed, empty, convenient. But Malik's had weight. It wasn't a performance. It was surrender. And though the hurt still lingered, something softer began to bloom beneath it. Maybe people didn't always get second chances, but maybe, just this once, they both deserved one. She smiled faintly to herself, realizing she wasn't angry anymore. Just unfinished. Malik couldn't sleep that night. He replayed every word she said, and didn't say. He'd spent his life mastering control, shaping outcomes, buying peace. But Ava had never been something he could calculate. She was the one thing he had to earn. So, at dawn, he made a decision. For once, he would let go of the business, the headlines, the numbers. He'd show her, not tell her, what it meant to choose her over everything else. The next afternoon, Ava arrived at her new office to find Malik already there. No suit, no assistants, no boardroom, just him. He told her had withdrawn from the merger, giving her company full independence. She stared at him, searching for the angle, but there wasn't one. "You built this," he said softly. "You deserve to own it." Her voice caught. This wasn't the man she met that day in the boardroom. This was someone who finally understood love isn't a contract, it's a choice. And in that moment, she realized he had made his. For the first time in months, the city felt calm. Ava walked along the beltline in the late afternoon light, the kind that turned everything gold. She hadn't planned on seeing him again. But love has a strange way of circling back, quiet, patient, waiting for the right silence. When she reached the park near the bridge, Malik was there, leaning against the railing. No suit, no tension, just him. For a second, she stood still, watching him. And in that stillness, she knew it wasn't anger or pride keeping her heart guarded anymore. It was fear of what came next, the kind of fear that only love could undo. He turned when she spoke his name, softly, like a memory finding its way home. They didn't rush. He stepped closer, and the air between them shifted, heavy, with all that had been left unsaid. "You didn't have to let go of everything," she whispered. "I did," he replied, "because none of it mattered without you." His voice was steady, but his eyes gave him away. It wasn't a plea, it was truth. And for the first time, she didn't question it. She just let the quiet speak for both of them. The world seemed to fade when he touched her hand, not like a beginning, not like an ending, but something in between. She could feel the tremor in his fingers, the quiet apology in his touch. He leaned in, close enough for her to hear the steadiness of his breath, and whispered her name like a prayer. She didn't pull away. This time, when his lips met hers, it wasn't about breaking rules. It was about surrendering to what had already been theirs all along. Later that night, they sat side by side on her balcony, the city alive beneath them. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. The silence was full of forgiveness, of lessons, of a love neither expected but both fought to keep. Malik looked at her then, really looked, and realized he'd spent years chasing things that meant nothing. And now, here she was, the one thing that made all the noise in his world make sense. Ava smiled, leaning against him, and for once, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like peace. Weeks later, the world called again. Business meetings, headlines, deadlines, but something had changed. They didn't need to hide behind titles or rules anymore. He stood beside her at a small gallery, opening she'd organized, hand resting lightly on her back, quiet pride in his eyes. And when she introduced him, not as her client, not as her past, but simply as the man she loved, he smiled. The same man who once swore love and business could never mix had finally learned the truth. Sometimes, love isn't the risk, it's the reward.